It says, Isaiah chapter 42 and verse 16, I will lead the blind by ways not known. Along unfamiliar paths I will guide them. I will turn the darkness into light before them, and I will make the rough places smooth. These are the things that I will do. I will not forsake them.
Thank you. Thank you. We wanted to start with that verse because it has been very significant on this journey we've been on since we talked about the decision to move back here. I'm just thinking probably the last time you saw us together, it was on the screen when we were communicating the fact that we are moving back here. And it was very emotional. I remember that day, and I'm happy to be here looking better than I looked that day, I hope. But it has been a journey, and we do want to start by saying thank you for standing with us in prayers and for the ways, many different ways you have encouraged us as we navigate this season that we are in. And for, I guess, for both of us to start this morning with Alex sharing the story about Amani, it spoke so much to us because we come from a place where we don't have the luxury of running away from pain, of pretending as if pain doesn't exist. It's the tension that we live with, the pain and the joy of our world. And it is in moments of pain that we get to see our Father being so faithful. And what a privilege to sit here this morning and just hear the journey that you've been on with your family, with Amani. And we've taken prayers very serious because we recognize that when we pray for one another, we get to celebrate those small miracles that if you were not praying, it would just be one of those, you wouldn't care. But if you walk with people praying in situations like this, you get to see these moments when our Father breaks through in small ways. They don't have to be big ways because we know the big way is coming at the end. As we sang that song, there won't be tears, there won't be pain. It will all be over. That is the biggest we are looking forward to. But in the meantime, we celebrate the small miracles and we see our Father being so close. So thank you for sharing so honestly. It ministered to us and it just made us realize afresh that we belong together. And this is what we are coming back to, navigating the brokenness of our world and being there for one another. So thank you. That verse we read was the word or the scripture that God gave me at the beginning of the year. And those of you know about hands, we get to have a watch word each year at the beginning of the year that get given to us by God, and it helps us to journey through the year and see how our Father wants to guide us. But as ladies at hands, we get to be encouraged to have our own personal watchwords. And that was my watchword for this year that God gave me in January. And it didn't make sense then. But as the year continued, I realized how much we needed him to guide us through the unfamiliar paths, which this has been so unfamiliar to us. It's not been an easy journey, as you might have realized from the beginning of it all. But along the journey, we learned lessons that has helped us up to this present moment. And obviously, talking about the journey, we do journeys in life differently. You guys have the luxury of driving from one place to another. But in our communities in Africa, they walk those journeys. And when you are going to do a journey, it doesn't matter whether you drive or you walk or whatever, you prepare, because you know the journey might be long and you don't know what's going to come your way. So you have to be very prepared. We didn't know what preparation we needed for this journey. But our Father, in his faithfulness and in his promise that he was going to guide us, we stand here today and we look back, we realize how he has guided us along this path that was so unknown to us up to this present moment. So at the beginning of the year, we had struggles with our family relationships, which again, that promise of him guiding us came so alive to me as Busie, because relationships are super important in our kingdom. We don't live without them, we just can't. So when relationships are shaken, it's not nice. So as the year started, we got ourselves into a muddle with relationships within our family, with our son and his wife. It was messy. And we were speaking to Tim and Caroline and Clinton and Jenny, because we recognized we needed people along the way. And in those conversations we're having monthly as a way of preparing us along this journey, we saw God's hand coming through. And we realized how we thought we were prepared for the road, but God had to reveal those gaps within our relationships for us to see where we needed him to help us. And in his faithfulness, he led us so faithfully. And my son got married in April, and I could not be more grateful to God. And I realized the beauty of the wedding was based on the messiness that we experienced before that. And I don't think I would have appreciated and seen God's goodness and miracles if we didn't walk the journey that was very rough leading up to the wedding. So that was one of the ways we saw that he did guide us through the unfamiliar path. And we also had the privilege of having communicated to Hans that this was going to be our last year on the ground. I was released from the responsibilities that I had all these years so that we could do this well. And I was very nervous. We talked about it with Stephen, and I told him, I'm just so afraid of being insecure and feeling insignificant and feeling lost in this place. And he's like, you know what, maybe you are not going to feel that way. Let's see what happens. And he was right, because not having those responsibilities meant I could say yes to things that previously I wouldn't say yes to because I was so busy with other things. So the gift in that was we found ourselves in places that we would not have had the privilege of being in those places if I was still holding the role I was holding. In January, I had the privilege of being in Zambia, and then from there I had to go to Nigeria, and then we were back in Zambia together, and then from there I went to Congo, DRC, which was the first time all these years I've been in Hands to get to Congo. Not that I didn't try, not that I wasn't invited, the doors just didn't open at all. And this time that I had released things to God and say, here am I would like us to end this well here, the doors opened. And I was able to be in Congo for the first time. And how he again made a way. The doors were closed until the last minute, until I got to the border, to from Zambia to Congo to get my passport stamped. And as we drive to the border, the gate official person came and said, the border is not opened for 3 days. There's misunderstandings between Zambia and Congo, so it's not been functioning for 3 days. And I stood there frozen, thinking, you got to be joking. This is my last opportunity, and now I don't know what to do. And one of the brothers from Hands that I was with Jackie, who pushes when doors are closed, she's like, maybe just go check in that office what's going on. So I went with Brian to the office, and he asked, so why is the border closed and what's the hope of it opening? And they say, we just got a phone call from the other side, it's opening now. So you guys are the first people to get stamped. I'm like, what?
I heard she was coming, Better open the border now.
Talk about God's faithfulness and him guiding us through these unfamiliar parts. So I was the first person to be stamped to cross that border. And there I went to the Congo DRC, not with any responsibility to get things done, but to support the team, to influence them for the last time, but also to be blessed by them. So again, that was a gift to us, because of course we were hoping that I would get to Congo. And then we again found ourselves together in Zambia, which doesn't happen all the time. So maybe Stephen can take it from there.
Yeah, it's actually been really lovely for me this year, watching Busie being freed up to be able to minister and operate without the burdens of specific duties and things to accomplish. So normally when she would go to another, Hands at Work operates in 8 different Southern African countries, and Busie had responsibilities in not all of them, but some of those countries. And so she would travel to those countries every year. She would travel to 2 or 3 different countries, but always with things to do. She would go there with boxes to tick, tasks to accomplish. And so this year, it was really nice seeing her being able to go to do the thing that she likes doing most of all, which is being away from... Busie likes to walk with people. So Busie talked about walking before. How we, in this... For those of you who've spent a little bit of time in Africa, when we've got to go somewhere, we drive. We quickly drive there and we do it, and we drive there, and then we do that and we drive there. But out in the communities, that is 99% of the time not a possibility. And so one of the most fundamentally, profoundly important ways in which encouragement and understanding and blessing, prayerful ministry and whatever can be shared with people on the ground in these communities is because it takes them half an hour to walk from one house to another, or an hour to walk from the care point to a house. And during that time, Busie can say, hey, how's it going? How's it working out with you and that other care worker? You were having a struggle with them before. And so this opportunity, no, not the rush in the Chrysler, not in the Voyager, whoa, we got to get there, look at the time. It's not that at all. It's being able to just walk and talk and encourage and chat. And so each time Busie would come back from one of these trips, and I'd sort of say, how are you going? And she'd say, oh, look, it was the best trip ever. And it was because she was able to do that walking, talking thing unhindered and without other burdens of responsibility, of duties and boxes to tick lurking in the background. So that was really good. When we sat and talked about Busie's watchword in preparation for this morning, something is I was saying to Busie, I think yesterday, that there have been elements of our resettling that have they've been difficult or challenging or I don't know, unpleasant elements of our resettling that have caught me by surprise, that I wasn't expecting. There were some things that I were thinking, oh yeah, that's going to be a challenge. I thought getting my old age pension was going to be a challenge. I know people, it's taken nearly a year after applying to get it. 2 days. How does that happen? I went for my interview and submitted the documents that I needed to submit at an appointment at Centrelink at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. 5 o'clock that evening, I got a phone call. Actually, it was a no-caller ID, and I think in Australia, a lot of you guys don't answer that because there's so much scam stuff going on. We don't get quite so much of that in South Africa. But it was a no-caller ID, and I thought, oh, what the heck, you know? So I answered it. She said, oh, hello, it's Therese from Centrelink. I'm doing some overtime, and I've just been looking at your application. And she said, and I said, oh, well, I'm out and about. She said, when you get home, look at your MyGov account. She said, there'll be a note for you there, and then you'll get a letter from us. And I thought, oh, what have I done? You know, what haven't I submitted? What's the problem now? I'll get home and look at it. Approved, and that was on the 20th of September, and my first payment went in on the 23rd. I mean, so there is. It's caught me by surprise in some nice ways, but also in some difficult ways. Mostly nice ways. But I've said to several people, Busie's been to Australia. This is her 11th time she's come to Australia. So this has not been sort of dramatically traumatic because it's an unknown sort of a thing. But we've never lived in Australia together. We've been tourists in Australia together. Even when we had our caravan or our granny flat or whatever, we were really only camping for a short time. And I knew that living here was going to be a bit more challenging. But I think if I had the opportunity and better recall, I could probably really, literally, no, that's a bad pun. I could probably really and honestly, truly write a book on the way in which it's been obvious that God has gone before us and is going with us. The way things have fallen into place. Oh, that's a coincidence. It's just crazy. So many things. The pension thing is one thing. A lot of you know that we had a caravan. In fact, I spent 13 months living in the caravan because of COVID, while my wife lived in the luxury of our house in South Africa. But when I bought that caravan, I bought it from a lady who lives at Grays Point, which was rather lovely when we bought it. She'd been trying to sell it for nearly 12 months. Again, it took me 2 days. I advertised it on the Saturday, a quick ad, and I found some photos and quickly put it on Gumtree. And on Monday, money went into my bank account. And I sold it basically for what I paid for it. I mean, things like that don't normally happen. So there was this element of blindness for both of us coming here because we haven't lived here. There's so many things we hadn't done we were going to have to be doing for the first time. But God has led us, and it's been quite a remarkable thing to stop and think for a moment just how many of these kinds of situations or challenges, which on any other day for any other person could be a major stumbling block or a major hurdle in being able to get from here to there. And somehow the door has just opened and we've gone through. I'll give back to Busie. We're looking forward because of the multitude of ways in which the way has been prepared for us. We're just walking in the way that God has made. It's, blind Freddie with a bucket over his head could see that, well, we're not here for no reason at all. If God has gone all of this trouble to make a smooth, even path for us to get from there to here, then there's a plan and a purpose for us being here together. Both Busie and I are convinced that it's something that we'll do together. I don't know what that is, so long as it's sailing or surfing. But in all seriousness, it goes without saying. We don't even talk about that now. We know that God has got an ongoing kind of ministry that will utilise her enormous skills in human relationships, and I don't know what my skills are, but anyway, there'll be something, that together. He's brought us here for a purpose, and so we're excited about finding out what that purpose is. Part 2.
So the question that people ask, obviously, probably 2 questions. One has been, what are my biggest fears for this season? The second one, which is very recent, is how did we end our time at Hands? And maybe I'm just going to start with the second one and then talk about the reality of being here now. Volunteers at Hands come and go. That's just the nature of who we are. We receive people, we embrace them, and we put them to use. We work with them very closely, whether they like it or not. And then we release them. But it's not always easy for them going, for us saying goodbye. So we were very nervous about ending with Hands, because I've always been there. I've been part of the furniture there, and Hands is celebrating 20 years this year. Actually, tomorrow, it's the start of the 20 years celebration. And I found myself wrestling with the fact that I wasn't going to be there, because it's the first time I'm not there for these significant moments of Hands. And our people were arriving yesterday from all these 8 countries, and I'm like, oh my gosh, can you imagine not being there? And I'm not there. And I was wrestling with that before I left. So the question of how were we going to end was huge. Our desire was to end well, yet we didn't even know what that means. What did that mean? If people are asking, what does ending here well means? I'm like, I don't know. Our desire is that this would be a beautiful story for us and for Hands as a community. And that became my daily prayer. And Kara can testify how many times we cried together around the fact that what does ending here well for someone like me who belongs there, and now I have to say goodbye. But our Father knows those deepest places in our hearts. First of all, I had to recognize that it was a big deal for Hands to release us. And I remember calling George saying, hey, can I come chat? And he's like, is that conversation that we've avoided for all these years? I'm like, I guess so. And he didn't wait for me to go there. He came to our house and we talked about the fact that our time is coming to an end this year. And it's like, we just have to embrace what God is doing. I don't know what it means for us. I don't know what it means for you, but we have to trust. And we can only trust. And obviously we prayed and that was it. But after that, I realized that people started grieving before I even left. Like we would be talking about whatever you were talking about, and people would get emotional, and I was avoiding starting grieving then because I thought, let me leave it till the end. But obviously, that made me to realize that there's what's the point of avoiding? The reality is like, this is hard, and I don't know if I could do it. But as we all recognize the pain in, this season, I guess we're able to invite God to those painful places to say what the journey has been like and what is ahead of us, and embrace the fact that we don't know what is ahead, but we know his faithfulness on the journey leading up to now. And we had to look at the people that we've been part of, the commitment to raise young leaders to take the vision on. And I had to think, who have I influenced? Or we talk at times about falling on each other like domino effect. I had to look back and say, who have I fallen onto? Who has Stephen fallen onto? How did we even fall on people? Was it a positive fall, or did we knock people over because we wanted things to get done? And in that, we had to say, God is giving us this season to do things right and to acknowledge what we have not done well. And that was the beauty of it, because we had to have honest conversations with the people in our teams, with the people in the community, about how difficult at times it has been to walk together, but also to translate the vision of caring for the most vulnerable. Who comes first when things get hard? Who are we fighting for? And I found myself being part of those talks to say, exactly what are we fighting for here? The kids that we are here for, they don't have the luxury of sitting in these discussions and saying, yes, this is right, no, this is not. And I had to make sure that I was communicating that well, because I'm like, I'm not going to communicate this again here. I may be able to communicate it across, but here, this is it. We are here for these children. And if we don't make the wise decisions as God guides us, we leave them more vulnerable than they were when we met them. And it was, I felt there was such a sense of urgency to communicating, why are we all here? And again, people were so hungry to take in anything we could say, as it felt like people were dying. They're like, what last words do you have to say? I'm like, oh, if death is like this, it's actually not bad. So we
Like being in heaven, isn't it?
we had many moments of really just sharing the history of hands, the experiences we've had, the fact that we are all invited and we can all leave a mark. But then the question is, how is that mark going to look like for people who come after you? Are they going to say, ish, this is a disaster, or they're going to say, you paved the way well for us to be able to walk on an open space? And that was our greatest prayer for this year. And I left Hands a month after Stephen left, and we had our farewell, whatever you call it, differently, because again we had to recognize that our time at Hands was different in our roles. But for me, it was such a privilege to watch Hands, come around us in celebrating Stephen's time there in the team that he was part of, but also as part of the community. And I could not have asked for more from our Father. I sat in the whatever goodbye thing we had for him. And my heart was just so full of gratitude because I felt this is who this community is. They come around people, they embrace people, they send people out with blessings, and Stephen received that. And for me, that was huge. And then he left, and I remained. And I went to Malawi to a leaders gathering. Again, I was invited. I didn't know why I was there because I was no longer in part of those. But I realized that God gave me that trip as a gift to me, for me to sit there and look across the room and look at the young leaders that have come up, that I had been part of their journey, and hear them talk about the things they understood about the vision of caring for the most vulnerable. And it just filled my heart. I cried almost every day in that gathering just because I was like, this is it. It's about people and them taking the responsibility to care forward. And coming back, then it was my goodbye, which again, it was how I would have wanted it to be. It was very much Busie-like kind of a thing, and I loved every moment of it. And they asked me to say something, which I always have something
And you
to
struggle
say.
with public speaking, don't you?
But one of the things that I felt I needed to say was, I am leaving that community as the most beloved volunteered hands. Nobody needed to tell me that. I felt so loved in that community this year. And it just made sense to me to say, if finishing well means you leave a community knowing that you are loved, that's it. Because then how I enter this community, if I enter it full of love, that's all that's needed. But if I enter it feeling like I've been robbed, they let me down, I'm disappointed, then you have to deal with me, with my issues. So I felt Hands gave the best gift by loving me the way, and they didn't even know they did that. But I'm like, as John, one of the 4 guys who wrote the Gospels, he talks about himself as the beloved disciple. He says that, I'm like, that's me. I'm the beloved volunteer here, and I'm leaving this place feeling very loved. So the question of how did we end our time at Hands, we ended it well. We felt very loved. We felt being sent with blessings from that community. Then the question is, how do we feel about being here? We talked about this with Tim and Clinton many times, because we had to acknowledge that for this season we are very much blind. We are going to need our Father to guide us along this path, but we are also going to need this community to help us navigate this, because we just don't know. Am I nervous? Very much nervous. Do I know why we are here? Not a clue, but I know that our Father brought us here for reasons that are known to him. So we are coming from a place where we walk with one another. People who know and people who don't know. At this moment, we are the people who don't know. So we are going to need you to hold our hand. And we are coming from a place where we don't just live on the shallow conversations where you just say it's okay when it's not. So we invite you into our lives, in our marriage, which often needs people, in our lives, in our calling, which we can do it without you. Speak the truth in love, okay? Don't say that's not our place, it's very much your place. Don't say it's none of your business. Here, it is your business. Hands is giving us to you. We better make this work, because otherwise, why are we here? So we are nervous, but in our nervousness, we are grateful to have this church community. And people kept saying, what are you grateful for in Australia? I'm like, PEG church community. That's the only thing I can think of now, because I just don't know if we could have done this move if we were not coming back to this. But how it's going to look, I don't know. It can be messy at times. And brace yourselves for that. The Joneses are here. Don't say you've not been warned. But we are here now. We are going to need help and guidance. The hope as we pray is that I can take 3 months up to the end of the year to just work through what, like there's so much I have to work through. And then hopefully by the end of the year, God would have brought clarity in our hearts as into what is it that is inviting us into in this country, in this community. So this is us.
I suppose time is against us a lot. I think it would be fair to mention my. Do you want to sit down or something? Do you want to?
I'm happy to stand next to you and give you support.
And give me a cuff over the back of the head if I say something. It would be remiss of me probably to not to mention, for those of you who are not completely familiar, a little bit about my role in South Africa, because I wasn't working directly on behalf of orphaned and vulnerable children as Busie was. I was a layer below that, so I was working on behalf of the Busies in the organisation, so that they had somewhere safe and secure and functional to live and to operate from in their ministry out in the community. And I was quite happy with that. But I needed to say it because it needs to be an encouragement to anybody who thinks, well, I couldn't do that. But you can actually serve the Lord, and you can actually be part of a team that's doing just extraordinary things, bringing hope to thousands, tens of thousands of African children, vulnerable children, by raking leaves, cutting the grass. That's what ministry is. It's not all frontline stuff. When you see an advertisement on TV for Médecins Sans Frontières, you see the doctors putting Band-Aids or whatever, but there's layers and layers and layers behind those guys that are keeping their vehicles on the road, keeping their ministry going, getting them from here to there, whatever. And so that was more of my ministry. But I was also volunteering 1 day a week for my local church. So Busie and I found ourselves at a Methodist church, which was continually a surprise to both of us, because neither of us are remotely anything a little bit Methodist. But the Lord seemed to guide us there and took us there, and we were comfortable there in believing that we had a role to play there, that we were fitting in and we were contributing. And so we were there for a long time. I think we must have been there for maybe nearly 10 years or something. It was a long time. And I was part of the ministry there. And it was strange because when we first went there, after a short time, I was invited. We started going to a cell group, a midweek cell group. I was invited to preach at an evening service, and then I was invited to preach at a morning service. And as the years went on, I got invited to do that more and more. I was on preaching rosters in two other areas. And so I was preaching fairly frequently, 2 to 3 times a month kind of thing, that was really good for me because I enjoy sharing the gospel. I've only got one sermon. It looks different each time, but it's all about Jesus every time. And so that was all very good. But earlier last year, when I got back, we had a new minister arrive, a young fellow fresh from Bible college. And when he found out that I wasn't a Methodist, and when he found out that I wasn't even a member of that church, even though I was part of the leadership of the church, he said, "Oh no, you can't preach anymore. You can't lead Bible studies. You can't preach anymore. The Methodist Church has rules about that." And the reason I'm saying that is not to pat myself on the back, but just to say that even in all of those things, God still had a plan, and there was ways in which he wanted to break through for the benefit of lots of other people. So in that congregation where we would go each Sunday was a retired Methodist bishop. So, big, heavy-hitting dude from some years ago. And when he found out what had happened, he prepared a letter to submit to whoever the person in charge was. I think they're called a superintendent or something, and got all of the leaders of White River Methodist Church to sign this, saying, "Look, this has happened to Stephen. Can this be reversed? Can he be reinstated?" So that was brilliant to start with. It went to the superintendent. We actually went to an interview with the superintendent, and he signed off on it, and he reinstated us. And the reason I'm saying that is because I wasn't standing up and speaking like today I wouldn't describe to somebody that I was a brethren. I don't even know if there's a thing called a brethren whatever person. I would stand up on a Sunday, whatever Methodist church I was speaking at that Sunday, as a Christian, as a believer, as somebody with whom God has dealt severely with, but implanted in me an ability to share his love and share the light of his goodness with people. And so I stood up as that person. And so it felt as though the Methodist tradition and all of that kind of stuff, it just, from heaven's perspective, it just wasn't as important as the gospel, as somebody speaking the truth in love and encouraging and building people up. And there might have been a couple of people in the congregation who were offended by the fact that this blow-in was busy doing that. But there were a lot of people that came to me and said, "We are just so glad. This is just the best thing. You're a precious part of the leadership of this church." And the send-off that I got at each of the there were 3 churches that I would regularly preach at, and the send-off that we got at each of those churches made it really, really clear that the man you raised up and trained in preaching, if you like, was able to have an impact, just cutting straight through denominational whatever's, able to have an impact. It was really funny. One time, this retired bishop, several years ago now, he was presiding over he would preach from time to time at the White River Church, and I was about to leave to come to Australia for my summer holiday time off, and so he wanted to pray for me. And he prayed that, when I go back to Australia, to that strange church that you go to. And I had to laugh, because if anything's strange, it's the Methodist church. To me, I got saved into an independent Pentecostal church, local church, and so I got saved into a non-denominational environment, where the Bible was the only book that was ever referred to. And so for me, denominations is a bit of an unknown, a bit of a weird thingy. And so, yeah, it was really weird. But anyway, so we're here, like Busie said, and we're here to serve, and we don't know what that's going to look like. We're a little bit nervous about that, but in some ways, we've been sent here. In some ways, we've been brought here. In some ways, we've been invited here. And so, yep, here we are. Thank you very much for giving us an opportunity to share this morning. And there you go.
Now, before you go, just a couple of reflections and then we'll pray. 24 hours ago, we stood in Paris airport in tears as we said goodbye to Cara. And she said in that moment, it never gets easy saying goodbye. And it doesn't. we miss her. But it's funny, isn't it? We gave Cara and we gave James to Hands, and now Hands has given us one precious person back. And so it has been a reciprocal relationship. And he was ours before he left. Yes, I guess we have him back in that sense. But I say that because whenever we give to God for purposes of blessing to others, he gives back to us ultimately in different ways. So why he's given you, Busie, as well as Stephen back to us, we don't know yet, and that's part of the journey of the next 3 months, is trying to understand that a little more deeply. We also said goodbye to James, and I was speaking to someone this morning that knows James, and he said, do you think he'll end up in the UK rather than back in Australia? And I said, we don't really know. We know that for the next 9 months he's going back to South Africa, and then after that there's a good chance he may end up settling in the UK. So that's sort of hard in a way to imagine that we're going to lose our son as well to the UK. But the comment I said to this particular person was, at the end of the day, I'm comfortable with wherever he ends up, as long as he ends up using his life for Jesus and for the gospel, because if he's going to stay in the UK and just make a lot of money and live a normal life, well, then I'm not really happy with that. But if he stays in the UK and uses his life for Jesus, then I'm happy with that. And so in many ways where we are doesn't matter so much as what we do with our lives, doesn't it? And so that's why, why God has given you back to us, we don't know, but we're really praying about that. And I think that would be something that we can, as a church family, is really ask God what these two, what it is for the next season for these two. Next Sunday is this lady's 50th birthday party, or 50th birthday. Yeah, and so it's sort of significant, isn't it? And so we're going to celebrate that with you next Sunday in some form, and just be thankful for that. So we need to be really prayerful as they transition in, and for the next 3 months. Lots of relationship stuff for this lady, yeah, because that's important. So lots of dinner invitations, lots of other things like that.
Is that you? We have to give lots of dinner invitations.
Yeah, and so I'm going to pray for them both now, because the next 3 months is going to be an important 3 months as they start to ask God, why is it that we're back here and what's our purpose? It's a new season. It'll be a season used for God, because he always uses these things if we're available. So let's just pray. Our Father, we thank you for this precious couple. They've woven their way into our lives, both individually and as a church family, in such deep ways over the last 15 odd years. And Father, it's a real privilege to have them back with us. But Father, they come back to us in a sense only on loan again, because they're here for your purposes. And so we ask, Father, that you'd make that really clear in the next 3 months, what it is exactly you have in mind for them, so that their lives can be used for the gospel and for the blessing of others. That's what we deeply long for them, and we know that's what they long as well for. And so, Father, we ask that you'd answer that deep prayer in their hearts. What is it in this next season, Father, that you have in mind for them? And so we ask that blessing for them, a blessing of a deep awareness in the months to come of your love for them, and of also how it is that they're to use their lives from this point. And so we ask for this gift, Father, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
One last reflection. We spent the last 2 days in Paris. And I tell you, it was a nerve-wracking as well as brilliant situation, because you don't know the language, you don't know how to travel around, you don't know everything that we take for granted here. And so we lived for those 2 days in a state of uncertainty. Even in the tube, we were working out how to use the underground system. And they turned it up a bit of a punch-up on the train, and we couldn't work out what the punch-up was about. We think retrospectively, one guy was trying to pickpocket another guy's pocket, and so he turned around and slugged him. But it's all you just don't know what's happening. And in many ways, that's going to be, particularly for Busie, that's going to be that cultural readjustment And so pray for her as she makes that journey, because everything's going to feel strange and odd and unusual. And so we need to be praying for you as you make that journey too.
Thanks.
Actually, for both of us, because this is not a small thing. I'm astounded at how much Australia has changed, even in the couple of years that I've been away. So many significant changes, to cultural changes. We were talking sometime over the last couple of days that now on TV there's football grand finals for AFL, rugby league, and I don't know, soccer or something for women. We're not all that excited about that kind of body contact sport for women, but that's now being shoved down our throats, kind of thing. It's an indicator of just how different this country is to the country that I left the last time I lived here. And so it's quite a challenge for both of us. We're really feeling the pinch of adjustment. So,
Thank you.
All right,
thank you.
we're done.